Yeah, sure. My name's Alice Bucknell. I'm a second year. I'm planning on majoring in like visual arts, anthropology, and minoring in gender studies.
Okay. And can you tell us about your project? Do you have a name for it? What medium it's in?
Yeah, it's called We Who Paint, and I mean, the full title, I guess, is We Who Paint, Anthropomorphic Painting with Outside the Lines. And it's essentially with my club, which is a fine arts figure drawing club on campus. We're interested in sort of like bringing the like interior sort of like dimension of figure drawing into like the outside world and introducing it to nature. And I guess we borrow a lot from artists like Eve Klein and other artists who like physically engage with the body and like reproducing the body. And I mean, it's definitely a lot different from what we've done in the past, which has been more controlled. I mean, it's always been outside, but it's been like people have used like paintbrushes, and here we're not letting people use paintbrushes. The only thing they can use is their body. Yeah, so it's kind of like a new spin on like a very old, like an older technique that we've been working with for a while.
Is it a photography?
Oh no, it's like we'll be having a model. It's a figure drawing event. Essentially, people will be like looking at a model and reproducing her image like on long pieces of canvas that are stretched around her.
That are stretched around her? That's
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, like on the floor around her.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, they'll be like bent over and like ideally kind of like, you know, using their palms, maybe like using like their elbows, using their feet to paint. It's sort of like the idea of like looking at the human body and reproducing that body in one's like mind's eye by using the physical like limits of their own body. Yeah.
Where did this idea come from? What was the inspiration?
Well, I mean, I'm like an anthropologist, I guess, and my interests in like the human body in terms of like gender and sexuality as well, sort of compacted with my interest in like storytelling and using the body as sort of like a means of, I don't know, like a means of conveying like a history. And I was really interested in like basically setting up like a visual narrative between participants in this event, because you know they'll be standing around a model, and each of them will be given like a large amount of paint, and they'll be like designated a certain space in this rectangle of a canvas that we've stretched around the model. And I'm hoping that people, when they set down to paint the model using their body, they'll also be conscious of and receptive towards how people around them are choosing to depict the body of the model. And ultimately, the canvas material that we're using will be sort of like broken down into like a long stretch of material as opposed to a rectangle, and it'll be a mural that will, I mean, hopefully will have some sort of cohesive read from one end to the other. So I mean, I don't know, like I guess I was sort of interested in the idea of like physically recreating a body with one's own body. That sort of like weird, like expressionistic element in art that almost like dates back to cave paintings. And I guess like the power of storytelling that bodies and visual art has over people.
Have you decided on the poses that the models would be in?
I don't know. I mean, we're hoping to sort of allow her to engage with her natural environment, because I mean, half of the emphasis of this event is using our bodies as like artistic tools, but then the other half is sort of like, well, how does the body relate to the world that it came from? So we're hoping that she'll sort of, you know, like maybe like wrap herself around a tree or like crouch in the grass or like just sort of gesture towards or somehow incorporate nature in her poses.
So this is like a group artistic process. What is your normal sort of individual medium or type of artist?
Yeah, see, that's the thing that's like very kind of different about this year's outdoor figure drawing, is that it is so communal and it's so collaborative. And the piece in its entirety, you know, it'll have anywhere from like 10 to 30 people working on it, and people will come and go throughout the entire session. and stake a claim to like a specific spot in the canvas and make their mark and leave. And in a way, like after the painting is complete, you know, it'll have this like interesting communal collective narrative to it, which figure drawing fundamentally doesn't do, you know, because I mean, when you're behind your easel, or you know, you're sitting at a table and you're replicating a model or really any object from life, it's very individualized and it's a very like internal process that you go through, and it's strictly nonverbal. People don't like, you know, like gossip while they're like trying to like recreate the image of a model. It's very quiet and independent. And frankly, I don't know. I mean, to me, it always seems silly to replicate the body with such seriousness and such solitude, because I feel like our bodies they're the way that we move through the world and engage with each other and engage with our surroundings. And I feel like any sort of artwork that's honoring or reflective or even in any way incorporates the body should have like this liveliness to it. Mm-hmm. Like it should incorporate the energy that bodies naturally carry with them. So I don't know. I mean, figure drawing conventionally always seemed kind of static to me.
Mm-hmm. So do you think you'll continue this method of making art in the future instead of a more individual, independent process?
I hope so.
So more community.
Definitely.
Contribution.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any ideas for future projects?
I don't know. I mean, I really like the idea of like the body replicating the body, and I'm hoping to sort of dovetail off of that in some different like iterations of how this project is done. Maybe like in relation to like time constraints. You know, it could be instead of like this thing that occurs in a moment, we could like start with, you know, the model appearing, she'll pose for an hour and then she'll leave, and then we'll leave the canvas there for people to mark upon for like another day or week or month. And it can be this incredibly like long drawn out process in which the narrative is no longer objective, it's entirely subjective. Like people come in and reproduce and create upon the previous creations of other people. So I mean, I don't know. There are like a lot of different ways that this project can go, which is why it's really exciting for me to sort of be introducing it this year, because this is very much like a test run. And if there's a positive reception for this kind of event by the university community at large, then it's definitely something that I want to keep working with and I want to keep introducing into the school in different ways.
And how do you feel that the university has been towards your art? Has it been a good environment to be an artist and a student here?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, having the Logan Center opening up really changed a lot. And I always feel a little hesitant to say that as a second year, because I only really experienced U Chicago without the Logan Center for the first quarter of my first year. I mean, after that, you know, it was all talk and people were so excited about having this huge building open up. And now that it is open up, it sort of serves as like the arts hub on campus, which is really great in a lot of ways. And I also think that the way that U Chicago approaches art is very different from what I thought art was when I first got here. Really all that I knew and cared about in visual arts was the visualness of it. And then when I came here, you know, like I remember like the first like assignment in my basic 101 class was not even a painting, it was to read a book. So, and I mean, this is the place where you read Marx and you read social theory in your painting class, and you read like Hannah Arendt in your sculpture class. And I think that that's fascinating, and I think that it's a really interesting and sort of unique approach to art in a way that is so theoretical, and you're building all of these conceptual ties before you even like grapple with the physical material. But it totally changes the way that for me personally, it changed the way that I approached art as not necessarily a physical activity, but a way of thinking. And in that sense, art goes with you wherever you go. You know, you're able to like consider and reconsider and think about art, and not necessarily physically produce it, but it's a conversation that stays with you. And I think that like presenting artwork as this sort of like very theoretical, very abstract kind of process is like a really interesting way, a very academic way, certainly, to go about it. And I mean, just judging on the body of student work that I've seen while being here, and the MFA students and the DOVA, graduates, it's doing its job. It's it's working very well. We get a lot of really fascinating art being produced here, and the Logan is sort of this like very physical testament to this like creative energy that just incorporates the entire university.
What about the FOTA show are you most looking forward to?
I mean, there's a lot about FOTA that I love. I guess like my favorite thing about FOTA is just the brevity of it, being this like week-long thing, and having so many different pieces of artwork and so many different forms of artwork going on. It's a bit like, scav hunt with more class, I'd say. Like anything can happen, but anything within reason can happen. And I don't know, I guess like what I'm really excited for is kind of having, which happens every year, and I feel like happens more days than not, taking any art class at UChicago is sort of like having your foundations rocked and dismantled in terms of what you think art is and what art does. And I'm just really excited to see the different ways that people approach the creative process and have chosen to work with FOTA to sort of present their creativity to the rest of campus. So I guess the element of uncertainty and maybe being caught, on my toes is, I guess, what I'm the most excited about.
Okay. Do you have any final thoughts or messages for the viewers?
Not really.